They call it an honor to be saved from death, to fight again in iron. But inside the sarcophagus, honor rots into silence, and silence becomes eternity. There are fates worse than death. This the Imperium never speaks aloud. To the faithful, it whispers only of sacrifice, of eternal duty, of the heroes who never fall. They tell their sons and daughters that to die in the Emperor's light is the highest glory. Yet there are warriors who do not die when death comes. They are dragged back, pieced together by machine and ritual, their broken flesh wired into iron shells that will never rot. They are entombed, not buried, preserved but never free. These are the Dreadnoughts. Engines of war, monuments of iron, and prisons for the living. Ulrich Rainer had once been flesh. He had known the feel of a bolt pistol's weight in his gaunted hand, the cold sweat beneath ceramite after hours in armor, the ache of muscles strained through endless campaigns. He had been a captain of the Iron Hammers, proud, unyielding, a man of laughter and fury both. His brothers had sung beside him, sharing meals of protein gruel, thickened with a masak stolen from the quartermasters, whispering stories of their youth before the gene seed had made them more than men. Ulrich had lived as a space marine lives, within the clash of blades and the roaring hymn of bolters. And he had believed, truly believed, that death in battle would be his reward. But death betrayed him. On Morik Prime, amidst the tide of orcs, Ulrich's spine had shattered beneath a warlord's hammer. His lungs had filled with blood. He had seen the sky fracture with fire, and thought himself already gone. In that moment, he had whispered the Emperor's name and waited for the silence of the grave. Instead, he awoke to steel. The sarcophagus was a tomb that breathed. Cables sank into what was left of his flesh, feeding him nutrients he could no longer taste. His ruined body was suspended in fluid and restraint. His mind lashed to machine spirits that hummed and whispered like mechanical ghosts. The first sound he heard in his new life was not the hymn of angels, but the hiss of respirators and the clanking steps of tech marines tending to his prison. When Chaplain Morai leaned close, his skull helm reflecting the cold lumen glow, he spoke words that rang with reverence. You have been chosen for the highest honor. You are reborn. You are Dreadnought. Honor, rebirth, salvation, all words gilded in faith. Yet behind them lay the truth. Ulrich was no longer a man. He was a weapon sealed in steel, doomed to fight until either machine or soul failed. The Imperium venerates its Dreadnoughts as saints of iron. In battle, they stride like walking cathedrals, each step shaking the ground, each cannon blast tearing heretics apart in sprays of blood and fire. To mortal eyes they seem eternal, untouchable, the Emperor's wrath made manifest. But those mortals do not see what happens when the battle ends. When silence falls. The Dreadnought does not return to barracks or feast hall. It is chained within vaults of stone and steel, lowered into chambers where rows of sarcophagi hum in. Endless half-life. There, centuries pass in darkness. No dreams, no voices, no laughter, only the void. Until war calls again, and they are wrenched back into motion. It is not life. It is not death. It is something far worse, an existence without end, without release. Through Ulrich's mind flickered memories that no longer belonged to him. The smell of promethium smoke mixed with the tang of battlefield blood. The sound of boots striking. Ferocry as his company advanced in prayers on their lips. The warmth of a brother's hand gripping his shoulder before a charge. Small details, so human, so fleeting, now made grotesque by their absence. When he reached for them, he found only steel. Where fingers had once curled, there was only the whir of servos. Where lungs had once drawn air, there was only the measured hiss of life support. Even his voice, once deep with command, was reduced to a grinding vox rasp, stripped of inflection. Emptied of warmth. He had been told he was immortal. He realized he had only been buried alive. The paradox of Dreadnought is this. To the Imperium, they are the highest honor a warrior can receive. To the one entombed, it is the cruelest sentence imaginable. Every ceremony, every hymn, Every reverent bow of the chaplains is not truth, but camouflage. Ritualized lies to mask a horror too bleak to admit. Yet Ulrich did not scream. He could not. Even his grief was confined, muted by machines that translated emotions into data, pain into signals, humanity into static. The galaxy would look upon him and see only a fortress of iron. None would see the man weeping within. This is where our story begins, with a warrior whose death was denied, whose honor was twisted into chains. A man who became a weapon, and a weapon that remembered dimly, desperately, what it once meant to be human. The Dreadnought is not a symbol of victory. It is a testament to the Imperium's cruelty, a cage built in the name of glory. And in Ulrich's long existence, truth would gnaw against faith, silence against memory, until he was forced to face the most terrible revelation of all, that immortality is not salvation. It is damnation without end. They told him he would awaken as more than a man. They told him the machine would carry his will, his strength, his very soul. They did not tell him the silence between heartbeats, when flesh no longer answers flesh, would feel like a grave. And to understand what Ulrich Wehner became, one must first understand how the Imperium venerates those bound in iron. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the word dreadnought is spoken with reverence, often whispered as if invoking a saint. They are depicted as eternal guardians, war machines that never tire, never falter, carrying the wisdom of centuries within their armored shells. In Imperial catechisms, they are the voices of the honored dead, bound in steel, not as prisoners, but as living monuments to loyalty. Children in hive cities are taught to pray for the strength of the ancients, and murals in cathedral hives depict dreadnoughts striding like demigods, fire blooming at their heels. But propaganda conceals cruelty, for no warrior is entombed while whole. The sarcophagus is not offered as an honor to the living, but as a sentence to the broken. Only when a space marine's body has been shattered beyond healing, when limbs are gone, lungs collapsed, organs ruined and death inevitable, only then is the offer made. It is the Imperium's final bargain: live forever as a weapon, or die as a man. Ulrich did not remember the exact moment his choice was taken from him. He recalled the battlefields of Morek Prime, the mud so thick it clung to his greaves like chains, the thunder of artillery shaking the earth, the wet taste of soil forced into his mouth when a blast hurled him from his feet. He remembered the pressure in his lungs as shrapnel pierced him, each breath a ragged knife. He remembered lying in the mire, staring up at the steel-colored sky, knowing his body was ruined. And then darkness. When he awoke, it was not to the quiet of death, but to the hiss of life support valves and the chant of voices. He opened his eyes, or thought he did, and found no flesh to move. His vision was fractured through lenses, glowing with static. The ceiling above him was a vault of iron ribbing, braziers spitting incense. Tech Marines circled, their servo arms clattering like the wings of insects. A chaplain stood at his side, black armor polished to a mirror sheen, a skull-faced helm. Glaring down, Brother Ulrich, intoned Chaplain Moray, voice amplified and metallic. You are preserved. You shall serve until the Emperor calls you at the end of time. This is the highest honor, the duty of the ancient. The words should have filled him with pride. Once, as a captain of the Iron Hammers, he had spoken those same blessings to his men, telling them that interment was a gift, the final proof of devotion. But lying there, immobile in a prison of steel, those words scraped across his mind like rusted blades. He tried to speak, to ask what had been done to him, but only a distorted growl emerged from Vox grills, not his own. The Tech Marines adjusted levers. Hydraulic oil dripped down pipes. The sarcophagus sealed around him with a groan of locking. Clamps. He could feel or imagine the last sensations of flesh vanishing. The warmth of blood. The rhythm of breath. The subtle tremor of his own heartbeat. In their place came a void, filled only with the hum of reactors and the cold echo of machine spirit systems whispering to his nerves. He remembered, suddenly and painfully, fastening a purity seal to his gauntlet long ago. the rough wax smearing. On his armored finger, the parchment fluttering in the wind. That memory burned bright for a moment, before crashing into the realization he no longer had hands. He would never again know the fragile weight of parchment, or the pressure of a seal pressed by flesh. The chaplain continued his sermon, prayers of devotion, oaths of vigilance, declarations that Ulrich had been saved for eternity. Around them, servitors moved like pale, lobotomized insects, wiring his broken body deeper into the machine, binding bone and metal together. A censer swung overhead, filling the chamber with choking incense, as though to mask the stench of death that clung to him still. The ceremony was not mercy. It was not honor. It was a ritual of captivity dressed in the language of sanctity. To the Imperium, appearances mattered more than truth. The gathered brothers, younger warriors of the chapter, knelt as the chaplain declared, "Behold the ancient, he who has transcended death." He was eternal. Their eyes were wide with awe. None could see that behind the mechanical roar of the Dreadnought, a human soul was shuddering in despair. Inside, Ulrich screamed against silence. He searched for the rhythm of his lungs, the beating of his heart, the sensation of movement, but found nothing. He was aware only of the weight of the machine pressing around him, vast and unyielding. A coffin yet never at rest. Time stretched. Seconds became eternities. He drifted between fragments of memory, the laughter of his brothers in training halls, the warmth of battlefield camaraderie, the simple taste of recaf before dawn. Each recollection stabbed deeper because they reminded him of what could never. Returned when next Chaplain Moray spoke, it was with quiet finality. "You are saved, brother Ulrich. You will walk again in iron." Ulrich closed his eye, or thought he did, and felt the truth settle like lead in his soul. Saved? No, he had not been delivered. He had been imprisoned. They told him he was saved. He knew he had only been trapped. Sleep, that was what they called it. But for Ulrich Wehner, there was no dream, no memory, no gentle drift into forgotten moments. There was only the void. A suffocating silence where thought itself unraveled, where time dissolved into nothing. When the machine spirits dimmed his awareness, he ceased to exist. And when they stirred him back, it was like being dragged from a grave that had never closed. This was his life now, eternity measured not in days or hours, but in awakenings and silences. When first he stirred within the sarcophagus, he remembered something absurdly small. He remembered fastening a purity seal across his armor chestplate before battle, pressing wax to metal, etching a prayer in his own hand. He could almost feel the grain of parchment beneath his fingertips, the heat of sealing wax against his glove. He reached for that memory as one drowning reaches for air. But when he tried to move his hand, he found no hand at all. Only the tremor of iron claws, the groan of pistons. A warrior's ritual, once human and intimate, was now forever. Beyond him, the first deployment came swiftly. Orcish raiders had struck at an agri-world. The iron hammers were called to cleanse. Ulrich was shackled within a drop pod, surrounded by brothers who whispered litanies before descent. He had once whispered with them, voices joined in unity, hands clasped in prayer. Now his voice rasped through a vox grill, a sound that unsettled even the most devout. The pod screamed through atmosphere. Impact thundered. Doors blew wide. And Ulrich strode into war on limbs that were no longer his. Battle with power, terrible and intoxicating. His assault cannon roared, tearing through orc flesh like parchment. His power fists smashed skulls with a force no mortal arm could match. He was destruction incarnate, the Emperor's wrath made manifest. Enemies who had shattered mortal lines now fell like wheat beneath his advance. For a moment, Ulrich felt purpose, not joy, not fury. Those belonged to the man he had been. But a hollow echo of meaning stirred within him, a whisper of what it once felt like to fight. And yet, when the last shot rang and the field lay silent, he felt nothing. The thrill was gone. Victory was not triumph. It was simply the cessation of targets. His brothers raised hymns of victory as they boarded the strike cruiser. Young Marines pressed hands to their chest plates in salute, gazes turned upward toward the towering shell of ancient Ulrich. To them, he was legend. To them, his survival was proof of the chapter's eternity. They called him Ancient One. Their voices filled with awe. Dado Arashi envied them. Their mortality was a gift he had been denied. They would die with their humanity intact, their voices unbroken, their memories still their own. He, in contrast, was sentenced to persist. A man preserved, but not alive. When the campaign ended, Ulrich was not led to feast halls or barracks. He was lowered again into the vaults, chained in darkness. His systems powered down, awareness dimming to black. The hymns of his brothers faded into silence. And in that silence, he realized something far more terrible than death. Victory did not bring rest. Only more silence. And silence was worse than death. Time is not kind to the entombed. It does not flow as it once did, measured in days and campaigns and laughter shared between brothers. For Ulrich Rainer, time became something alien. It stretched and collapsed, blurred and folded, leaving only fragments. He did not count years anymore. He counted awakenings. Each time his sarcophagus stirred to life, he emerged into a world subtly changed. Chaplains with familiar faces had grown lined with age, or were gone entirely. Captains who had once trained beneath him now commanded in his stead. And beside them stood new initiates, their armor unmarked, their eyes filled with awe as they gazed upon him. To them he was legend, a remnant of ancient wars, a living relic of a chapter older than their lifetimes. But Ulrich knew the truth. He was not legend. He was debris, dragged endlessly through history, unable to rest while the galaxy moved on without him. At one awakening, he tried to remember the sound of his own laughter. A simple memory, so trivial it should have come easily. He had once laughed with his brothers after training, sweat steaming from their armor as they mocked one another with good humor. He had laughed when they shared stolen Amasek in the barracks, voices rough with song. Now, when he searched for it, he found only static. His mind reached for sound, and the machine returned silence. He tried again and again, but laughter no longer existed. It had been erased, lost somewhere between the voids of slumber and the endless awakenings. That was when the fear began. In the vaults. He was not alone. Other dreadnoughts slumbered around him, titans of iron standing like statues in rows. Some whispered faintly, their machine spirits murmuring through the quiet. Others lay silent, their occupants either dead or so eroded they could no longer respond. Among them was Brother Ancient Gareth, a veteran interred centuries before Ulrich. His voice rasped through vox channels, dry as rust, heavy as stone. When Ulrich confessed his fading memories, Gareth answered without pity, "Forget." The word echoed like a tolling bell. Each time you wake, you will remember less, and it will hurt less. Ulrich recoiled at the suggestion. Forgetting was death of another kind, a slow unmaking of the man he had been. But Gareth spoke as one resigned. There's no mercy here, brother. Memory is only another battlefield, and we are all losing. Decades bled into centuries. Wars came and went. Ulrich strode across battlefields whose names he could not recall, crushed enemies, whose banners he no longer recognized. The Imperium shifted around him, rulers rose and fell, edicts changed, entire sectors burned. But to him, it was all the same cycle of silence and war. At each awakening, faces grew younger. Entire companies of Marines who had once trained. Under him were dust, replaced by initiates who saluted him as if he had always stood above them. He watched generations bow before his iron form, never realizing that the man they honored was crumbling away inside. The galaxy remembered him better than he remembered himself. A darker fear gnawed at him. If laughter could vanish, what else would follow? How many awakenings before he forgot the feel of mud under his boots, or the warmth of blood in his veins, or the face of his brothers. How long before he forgot his own name, Ulrich Rainer? He whispered it into the void, again and again, as though repetition might nail it into eternity. But even as he spoke it, the sound seemed thinner, weaker, ready to slip away. One day he knew he would awaken and the name would be gone. And when that day came, nothing human would remain. The Imperium called this honor. The chaplain spoke of eternity, of wisdom preserved. But beneath the hymns and litanies lay a cruelty so vast. It masqueraded as faith. The system did not care if Ulrich forgot his name. It did not care if his memories bled away into static. All that mattered was that he could fight. A dreadnought is not preserved. A dreadnought is consumed slowly, deliberately, until only the machine remains. Ulrich endured, but fear lingered. With each cycle of silence, with each return to war, he felt the erosion of self. He wondered how many of his fellow ancients were already hollow, their humanity long stripped away, their iron shells moved only by reflex and programming. Perhaps that was the true fate of every dreadnought, to become an echo without meaning. A ghost screaming through wires until even the scream faded. It was during one such silence, after centuries of drift, that something unexpected happened. In the void between awakenings. Ulrich dreamed not static, not silence, but something more. He stood upon a field of memory, watching himself as he had been, flesh and blood, a captain of the iron hammers, laughter booming with his brothers at his side. He felt his hands again, felt the ache of lungs after battle, tasted sweat, and a massacre on his tongue. For one impossible instant, he was alive again. And then the dream turned. His human self looked upon him with eyes filled not with pride, but with sorrow. And though no words were spoken, Ulrich felt the accusation burn deeper than any blade. He woke screaming through voximeters as battle klaxons roared. The dream clung to him like blood on steel. Something had changed, and he could not unsee it. In silence, the dead find their voice. In silence, the living are made to listen. It began like all his other slumbers, the descent into void, the stilling of thought, the suffocating absence of time. But this silence was different. Instead of emptiness, Ulrich found himself standing not in iron, but in flesh. He looked down and saw his hands, scarred, calloused, marked by the faint ink of purity scripts once etched for luck. Fingers flexed, joints cracked, warmth pulsed beneath skin. For a moment, disbelief threatened to unmake him. He drew a breath and lungs filled with air, heavy and sharp with battlefield smoke. His twin hearts pounded with a rhythm he had not felt in centuries. The illusion was cruelly perfect. Before him stretched a memory long buried, the training fields of the Iron Hammer's fortress monastery. The ground was worn from centuries of drills, stones scarred with boot prints of generations. The air smelled of oil and ozone, the faint metallic tang of sharpened blades. And there, in the distance, stood men he had once called brothers. They laughed, sparred, raised blades that gleamed in sunlight. And among them stood himself, Ulrich Rainer as he had been. Tall, broad, alive. His armor gleamed with fresh polish, untouched by the centuries of corrosion that would one day scar it. His eyes burned not with static-fed lenses, but with human fire. This figure turned toward him, recognition dawning, and for the first time in centuries, Ulrich saw his own face. It was like looking into a mirror twisted by time. The younger Ulrich carried pride in his stance, conviction in his eyes, a strength rooted in flesh and bone. And the older, entombed Ulrich felt a pain deeper than any wound. He had forgotten his face. Now it stood before him, a ghost made flesh. The younger Ulrich spoke, his voice clear and unbroken by static. They told you. It was honor. The words were not a question. They were a blade. They did not tell you it would cost your soul. The elder Ulrich faltered. I was saved. The younger's gaze hardened. Saved? You begged for death on Morag Prime. You prayed for silence. And instead, they chained you to iron. They called it glory because they dared not name it cruelty. The memory of that battle surged again, the hammer crushing his spine, the blood filling his lungs, the whispered prayer for release. He had asked for peace. What he received was eternity. The younger Ulrich stepped closer. His expression carried no hatred, only sorrow. Do you know what you are now? Not a captain. Not a warrior. You are a fragment. A man eroded piece by piece. Locked in a shell until even your name fades. They will hail you as ancient. But, in truth, you are only a prisoner who has forgotten the shape of his chains. Ulrich wanted to deny it. To shout that he still commanded, that he still bore loyalty. To his brothers, that duty alone gave meaning to his endless march. But the words clung to his throat like rust. He had felt the loss already, the static where laughter should have been, the hollow silence after every battle, the envy of mortal marines who still bled and died like men. He had been eroding all along. The dream grew darker. The monastery walls bled into shadow. The brothers faded one by one, until only the two of them remained, the man of flesh and the man of iron. The younger reached out, hand steady, warm with life. Ulrich lifted his own, desperate to feel that touch, but when their palms met, the illusion shattered. Flesh turned to iron, fingers became claws. The warmth fled Dot, and Ulrich realized he could not cry. The sorrow pressed against him, but the sarcophagus did not allow tears. Dot to be denied even grief. That was the final cruelty. The younger Ulrich spoke once more, his voice fading like an echo across a gulf of centuries. This is your eternity. Not life, not death, just the endless erosion of self. You are not preserved. You are consumed. The words seared themselves into Ulrich's mind. He tried to protest, to call the Emperor's name, to cling to faith as he always had, but no prayer came. Only silence. Dot, and in that silence, the truth stood naked. The vision collapsed. Darkness folded over him once more. When Ulrich's awareness returned, it was not to flesh, but to iron. He awoke within the sarcophagus. Servos grinding, fluids hissing, machine spirits whispering in tones colder than any human voice. Around him, alarms blared, summoning him back to war. But he no longer awoke as before. The truth clung to him, etched into every thought. Dreadnoughts were not heroes preserved. They were men entombed, their humanity slowly stripped away until nothing remained. And for the first time in centuries, Ulrich felt true horror, not at battle, not at death, but at himself. Every prison burst defiance. Even iron cannot contain the memory of being free. The world burned beneath him. Another battlefield, another nameless world already lost to corruption. The air reeked of promethium and sulfur, thick smoke choking. The skies, broken spires jutted like blackened teeth from ash-choked ground, and demons howled in the distance, voices clawing at the edges of sanity. Ulrich strode into that inferno, his colossal frame shaking the earth with every step, assault cannon roaring Dot around him. Younger iron hammers fought and died in desperate fury, their hymns drowned by the cacophony of war. They looked to him, their ancient, their living relic, as proof that the Emperor's light endured. They saw a god of iron. They did not see the soul inside. Ragged and weary, carrying the weight of revelation, the Ravager came through flame and ruin. A chaos warlord clad in twisted armor, his bulk swollen with dark power. Horns curled from his helm, chains rattled from his weapon, and his laughter carried above the roar of battle, a sound not of joy, but of contempt. He raised his demon axe and bellowed across the field, his words thick with mockery. You are already dead, machine ghost. You fight for nothing. The accusation struck harder than the weapon, because Ulrich knew it was not entirely false. He had been stripped of name, of laughter, of touch. He had become a shadow bound to iron, but even shadows remember the light that once cast them. The two titans collided. The Ravager's axe struck his sarcophagus, sparks and screams of tortured metal shrieking into the air. Ulrich's power fist met it in return, shattering the ground beneath their flesh. Servos strained, hydraulics bled pressure. Alarms howled within his frame, yet still he fought. Each movement was not programming, not reflex, but choice. The Chaos Warlord pressed closer, eyes glowing with warp-born fire. "You are nothing but a tomb walking," he hissed, grinding the axe down toward Ulrich's chest. An echo of flesh, a slave of silence. And for a heartbeat, Ulrich almost believed him, but then memory surfaced. Not grand victories, not banners or oaths, something smaller, more fragile. He heard the voice of Brother Holden, long dead, laughing during training drills. He remembered the teasing jests after a clumsy fall, the warmth of camaraderie, the simple sound of joy. Laugh lived in him still. And as long as it lived, he was not only machine. Ulrich surged with renewed fury. He twisted aside, his power fist hammering into the Ravager's chest, sending the Chaos Giant staggering. His assault cannon roared point blank, tearing armor, and flesh alike in gouts of gore and fire. Yet even as he struck, he was not merely executing commands. He was fighting as Ulrich Vaner, captain of the Iron Hammers. A man, the Ravager roared, defiant even in ruin. Warp fire spilled from his wounds, demonic essence writhing in fury. With a final bellow, he raised his axe once more. But Ulrich's FIST crushed helm and skull in one terrible blow, silencing the warlord's laughter forever. The battlefield hushed around him, the duel's end echoing through the chaos. His brothers cheered, their faith renewed by his victory. To them, it was proof that ancient Ulrich was eternal. To them, it was legend. To Ulrich, it was something else. For the first time in centuries, he felt alive. But as the battle quieted, a deeper silence crept in. Within his sarcophagus, warnings blared, neural decay, cognitive failure. His organic mind, the last remnant of humanity clinging to his iron form, was faltering. He could feel memories slipping like sand through broken fingers, names blurred, faces dissolved. Even Halden's laugh threatened to fade again. He had won, but he was losing himself. Ulrich stood amidst corpses and ruin and knew this truth. His time was short. Not because his machine would fail. The tech marines would repair, would mend, would keep the iron walking, but because his mind would unravel. The man inside was dying, piece by piece, and he would not allow himself to vanish without leaving something behind. He turned from the battlefield, his towering form limping back, toward his brothers. To them, he was a hero. To himself, he was a ghost racing against erasure. And in that moment, he made a choice. Not the Imperium's, not the machines, but his own. He would record his truth. He would speak for those entombed, for every soul shackled in iron silence. He would not let eternity consume him without leaving a voice behind. Sometimes the only victory left to the dying is the story they leave behind. Iron can be mended, flesh can be patched. But once memory fades, no hand can restore it. That is the true death, and it comes long before the body fails. Ulrich's victory over the Ravager echoed across the battlefield. But within the sarcophagus, there was no triumph, only silence, and the slow unraveling of thought. His machine still strode, but his mind trembled, fraying at the edges. Names slipped, memories bled away, and the weight of centuries pressed harder with each passing moment. He knew he was failing. Not the iron, not the machine. That would be tended, sanctified, repaired endlessly by the hands of tech marines. It was the man inside who was dying. The captain of the Iron Hammers was eroding, flaking away like rust. And soon there would be nothing left but a shell that fought without knowing why. That was not a fate he would accept. Back in the vaults, chained once more in silence, Ulrich stirred against his prison. His voice rasped through internal systems, a whisper of vox signal carried into the sarcophagus itself. He began to speak not to chaplains, not to tech marines, but to whoever might find his words when his mind was gone. His testament. Brothers, if you hear this, know that I was once a man. Know that beneath the iron, I laughed. I fought beside you. I bled beside you. I was not eternal. I was mortal, and proud of it. They told me this was honor. They did not tell me it was silence. The machine hummed around him, servos shuddering as though resisting the confession. But he pressed on. Do not believe the lie of immortality. Choose to feel, even when feeling brings pain. Choose to be human, even when humanity costs you everything. For without that choice, we are nothing but ghosts chained in iron. As he spoke, images flickered unbidden across his mind. Brother Holden's laughter on the training fields, the smell of battlefield mud heavy with rain, the ache of lungs after long marches, the pressure of sealing wax under his hand as he pressed. Purity scripts to his armor, small fragments of humanity, all fragile, all vanishing. He clung to them like relics, as though memory alone could hold back oblivion. But the decay was accelerating. Words slurred. Thoughts frayed. His systems dimmed, stuttering as the organic core of his mind finally began to collapse. For the first time since Morag Prime, Ulrich felt something like release. His respirators faltered. The machine spirits whispered their last litany, and darkness began to close around him. But this darkness was different. It was not the suffocating void of sarcophagus slumber. It was softer, deeper. Final dot. And in that darkness, he imagined voices. Not mechanical vox snarls, not machine-echoed hymns, but human voices, his brothers, singing as men. Hymns of courage, songs of memory, laughter unbroken by static. The choir of humanity he had longed to hear again. He let it carry him into silence, true silence, not imprisonment, not void, but rest. When the tech marines came, they found his sarcophagus intact, its machine spirits dormant, its systems cold. Ancient Ulrich had fallen silent, his iron frame kneeling in the vault like a statue left to mourn. They pried open channels, seeking commands, seeking responses. None came. But within the records of his sarcophagus, they found the message. A fragmentary vox log, words etched into sacred archives. His final testament. Some among them called it blasphemy, a corruption of duty, a weakness unworthy of record. Others said nothing, their eyes downcast, as though they too understood the weight of his words. The file was sealed, hidden away, in vaults where only the most trusted could read. Yet even in silence, truth has a way of spreading. And some whispered still of ancient Ulrich, not as relic, not as legend, but as man. The Imperium continued. Wars burned, brothers died, centuries rolled on. To the chapter, Ulrich Wehner was remembered in stone and song as a mighty dreadnought, an honored ancient who had slain a warlord of chaos. His deeds were inscribed, his name hallowed, his image carved into cathedral walls, but no hymn told of the prison he endured. No sermon spoke of the silence that gnawed his soul. To the Imperium, truth is often the first casualty, and yet his final words remained. A whisper against eternity. A dreadnought is not salvation. A dreadnought is a coffin. Inside each walking, Titan is not a hero preserved, but a ghost fading. A man consumed piece by piece until nothing remains. They are not honored relics. They are prisons filled with fading souls. Ulrich's story is only one among thousands. Across the galaxy, in vaults heavy with incense and silence, others slumber still, heroes entombed, minds eroding, their humanity bleeding away in forgotten centuries. To their chapters, they are living saints. To themselves, they are forgotten. Men screaming into iron walls. Perhaps some cling, as Ulrich did, to fragments of memory. A laugh, a song, a brother's face. Perhaps some choose to forget, as Brother Ancient Gareth once advised, surrendering memory to ease the pain. And perhaps some still fight, not for the Emperor, not for the Imperium, but simply to remember what it felt like to be alive. And Ulrich chose defiance, not in battle, not in victory, but in testimony. His weapon was not cannon or fist, but truth spoken into the silence. A truth that could not save him, but might awaken others to the cost of eternity. Choose to feel, even when feeling brings pain. Choose to be human. That was his final gift. And so the question remains not for Ulrich, who rests at last, but for us who linger. If offered eternity, would you endure? Would you let yourself be chained to silence in the name of honor? Would you surrender your laughter, your face, your soul for centuries of hollow war? Or would you choose to rest as all men must,